We're going to turn back to politics now as we approach the first debate in the 2016 presidential election cycle. The conversation invariably focuses on style versus substance. Our next guest says now is the time to start a, quote, serious discussion on serious ideas. Sometimes easier said than done. Jerry Seib is Washington bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal, now covering his 10th presidential election. Lucky number 10, Jerry. How do you think this one compares to the other ones?
You know, they're all interesting, and there's not one that's like another. It's really remarkable. And I don't think I've ever seen 16 or 17 candidates, and I can't remember which number it is on one side. So we're in uncharted waters here.
We are at 17. We'll see if we add some, lose some. We don't know. Anything can really happen. So your article is really interesting this week because it maps out 5 big ideas. I know our viewers are constantly asking, where are the big new ideas from the candidates? And you actually isolated a few of them. I wanted to start with Chris Christie's. You say his plan on entitlement reform is worth a look and worth a conversation. Why is that?
Well, look, I mean, he went right away to someplace most politicians don't want to go or will go only at force, which is to entitlement reform, to fixing Social Security and Medicare in a way that makes them more solvent over the long term. And he said some tough things. He said raise the retirement age for Social Security over the next 25 years, raise the eligibility age for Medicare, reduce the benefits for wealthier senior citizens on Social Security, raise the premiums for wealthier senior citizens on Medicare, make them solvent for the long haul. Most politicians don't like to talk about Social Security or Medicare unless forced to. Chris Christie did something interesting. He went straight there at the beginning of his campaign. The question is, do others want to buy into that idea? Do others have different ideas? Is there a conversation that's going to break out on this subject?
Jerry, in your opinion, is it a good enough proposal that this will be a win for him, rolling the dice and going straight for the tough stuff first?
I'd like to think so in some ways because, for example, Social Security doesn't require that much surgery to become more solvent over the long run. Medicare is going to have to be addressed. It's the sort of subject that ought to be talked about in a presidential campaign. It too often is not. I mean, I do think you have to give credit where credit is due. At least he's put the subject on the table.
Political courage, some say. Let's talk a little bit about Senator Marco Rubio, who's really talking about foreign policy. You say what's interesting about his foreign policy is the way that he wants to use the American military. This is something I hadn't heard a lot about. Why is that significant?
He made a very interesting proposal in a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations several weeks ago. It hasn't gotten much attention, but he said essentially in the 21st century we should be willing to use U.S. power not just to protect our own national security, but to safeguard the international economy. That if an invasion of another country threatens economic activity, if a country threatens a choke point like the Strait of Hormuz, we should declare that we're going to use American military power to defend the free flow of the international economy. Is that a good idea because that's something only the U.S. can do, or is that an overreach? Is that making the U.S. the policeman of the world? And by the way, he said that applies all the way up into outer space as well. It's an interesting idea. It hasn't gotten much discussion. Maybe it can this week.
What do you think that tells us about Marco Rubio?
Well, I mean, he's a hawk. He wants to be seen as one of the hawks in this debate, and that particularly is in contrast with Rand Paul, and I think that was the context in which some of these ideas were thrown out originally. Rand Paul is saying essentially we've been too knee-jerk in our willingness to use American military power around the world. It's gotten us into some trouble. Let's be more judicious. That's an interesting debate.
Well, it certainly is, and we'll see if that hits center stage on Thursday. Jeb Bush, you say there's 2 proposals he's put out there, the balanced budget amendment and a line item veto. They're not necessarily new ideas, but you say it's noteworthy that he's talking about it.
Yeah, it is, because he threw them out in the context of let's reduce government spending. The chief executive doesn't have enough power to do that. I want to arm the next president, hopefully me, I assume, with these ideas. And look, I mean, there's not going to be a lot of debate on a Republican debate stage about the balanced budget amendment. Everybody will pay lip service to that. But is that really a good idea when the federal government, as we saw in the financial crisis, needs some flexibility to invest money in a downturn so that you can stimulate the economy? And as a line item veto, which a governor or president likes because he can knock out spending items on his own or her own, that's a good idea if you're the chief executive, but if you're a legislator, like Marco Rubio, for example, and there's a Democratic president, maybe you don't want the president to have that much power. So, again, those are 2 well-worn ideas, but they're worth new conversations in the current context.
It was nice to talk a little bit about the substance. Often we're not quite there yet, Jerry. We're not quite there yet. So I encourage our viewers to check out the other ideas you put forward by Hillary Clinton and also Rick Perry in your column this week, and we always look forward to having you back. Jerry, thank you so much.
Sure, my pleasure.